Hello, hello, and welcome back to CS 492F in fall 2023. We are talking about futures of the world, and we have moved on from simply predicting to trying to steer the futures of the world. And last time we heard, for example, we heard Carl Sagan testify in Congress. Carl Sagan, the astronomy professor, testify in Congress about climate change. That was in 1985 already. So let me briefly remind you of that. Let's just jump in here.
If we were only as far apart as we are in this room. If you add these infrared absorbing gases to a planet, then what happens is the sunlight comes in as before, but when the surface tries to radiate to space in the infrared, it is blocked, it is impeded by the absorbing gases. And so the surface temperature has to rise so that there is an equilibrium between what comes in and what goes out. So this is the greenhouse effect. It is.
So that is like almost 40 years ago. He, as a professor on astronomy, used his expertise, theoretical expertise, right, in order to have political impact and change the future of the Earth, of the world, into a better future by warning against climate change and by making suggestions such as creating taxes on carbon-based energy and subsidizing green energy in order to foster a transition that gives a promising climate future. So, and that's where we're going to take off from here. And so let me share the screen. Maybe climate change, this warning has been picked up by many people, the whole green movement. And I'd like to mention two of them, Al Gore, former US Vice President, and Greta Thunberg, a recent high school graduate. So here you see Greta, born in 2003, so she's 20 years old now. And here you see Al Gore, born in 1948. So he's like, what, 75 right now. And they founded important movements. So Greta initiated the Fridays for Future movement, and Al Gore initiated the Climate Reality Project, for which he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. So let me show you some footage from Greta and from Al Gore.
Why is it so important to stay below 1.5 degrees? Because even at 1 degree, people are dying from the climate crisis. Because that is what the United Science calls for, to avoid destabilizing the climate, so that we have the best possible chance to avoid setting off irreversible chain reactions, such as melting glaciers, polar ice, and thawing Arctic permafrost. Every fraction of a degree matters. So there it is again. This is my message. This is what I want you to focus on. So please tell me, how do you react to these numbers without feeling at least some level of panic? How do you respond to the fact that basically nothing is being done about this without feeling the slightest bit of anger? And how do you communicate this without sounding alarmist? I would really like to know.
In order to advance our continued progress, we need to provide political leaders, investors, and financial systems with the tools that will enable them to make informed decisions. I know how committed Frontiers is to ensuring scientific data and research are open and accessible. Yours is a remarkable community that understands the need to make every resource available to help inform solutions to our greatest global challenges. It's a mission that I admire, and one that mirrors the work of a coalition that I recently co-founded called Climate Trace. TRACE is an acronym that stands for Tracking Real-Time Atmospheric Carbon Emissions. And our goal in this new coalition is to usher in an era of radical information transparency for greenhouse gas emissions monitoring by providing independent, highly accurate, timely, and granular data on the specific sources of the greenhouse gas pollution now warming.
So I'm gonna stop with the presentation here, and instead want to encourage you to listen to the speeches, both speeches in entirety, the one from Greta Thunberg and the speech of Al Gore. Because in fact, I'd like now to move on to a more biological and thermodynamic and a view on Earth and climate change. Remember, there's this theory about civilizations evolving from a planetary society to a solar system-based society, and then on to a space society. And the great filter is kind of what apparently prevents societies, alien societies, and possibly also human society to proceed to that next level, to enter the stage of planetary society. And over the past million of years, life on Earth has suffered from many both great advancements, but also from setbacks. There were many near extinction events took place, and currently what we see is sometimes called the sixth big extinction event, and this is caused by humanity. It's also called the Anthropocene age. So what one observes is, as a consequence of the greenhouse emissions, mostly carbon dioxide, one observes many changes in our environment, and rising temperature is just maybe one of them, and very subtle. So we see, and this is called tipping points, we see more frequent droughts in Amazon rainforest. We see a reduction of ice in the Arctic Sea. We observe a slowdown of Atlantic circulation, which was kind of mixing warm water from the warmer regions and bringing them to, for example, to England. So the temperature in England and in Norway would be much colder without this Arctic Atlantic circulation. Then there are increasing number of forest fires and pests. Coral reefs die off on large scale. Greenland ice is accelerating to melt down. Permafrost here in the Siberia starts to thaw, and thus accelerate and release more greenhouse gases and thus accelerate. So the whole thing is that all these developments are kind of self-accelerating, right? So this is apparently an unstable system, right? It's not like raising the temperature results in a counter effects that reduce the temperature back to its stable point again, but it's quite the opposite. Raising the temperature accelerates the process that in turn accelerates the temperature and so on. Our Antarctic ice sheet is melting, and East Antarctica. So these are called tipping points because once we go past them, since the effect is self-accelerating, then there's no way of returning back. And as Greta Thunberg has pointed out, every 10th of a degree counts, so that we avoid moving past these tipping points, because then it's kind of too late. And this is why the current area of the Earth is like 4 billion years old, and the current area is sometimes called the Anthropocene, because this is really the human footprint that causes large-scale change of the environment the first time in the entire history of the planet. There were some previous extinction events. Let's recall them. 5 were before the big 5 extinction events. And in each time it was a climate-induced change of the fauna and flora. But this is the first time that this is really caused by inhabitants of the Earth and not externally by developments of atmosphere or sun change. So here we see really the high emissions causing the 6th extinction. If we raise the temperature, here you see the temperature raise in degrees, right? And if we stay below 1.5%, then there's still a chance to keep effects in check. But beyond that, it is really going to affect our future. So this is about the big extinction events, and just one effect. Let me point out is the effect that humans have with the pesticides, right? So not just the greenhouse gases, but we've created pesticides with good intentions actually, right? So the intention is to increase crop to feed the world, to feed humanity. And to this end, we've kind of tried to eliminate pests that eat our crop. But as always, any effect also has some undesirable side effects. For example, bee populations are heavily in decline. So let me stop this slide for a moment and show you what would happen to a world with less or even no bees at all.
Bees are a really interesting kind of insect. You're probably familiar with honeybees, and you've probably seen bumblebees, but there are actually about 20,000 species of bees all around the world. Bees are found in almost all habitats, and they play a really vital role. They might look different, they might have different names, but they almost all do the same basic thing for us and for the environment, and that's that they pollinate plants, and they help make sure that plants can reproduce. Bees are vital for most of the foods that we eat. 1 in every 3 bites of food we take on any given day was probably helped along by a bee somewhere. But we're observing some declines in bee populations around the world, and it looks to be a number of factors coming together all at once. One of them is pesticides. While there's legitimate use for pesticides and controlling unwanted and damaging crop pests, we need to make sure that those chemicals don't have unwanted effect on our bees. World without bees, in the worst case, it wouldn't just be that our diet was bland, it might be that we don't have enough food to go round anymore. But I think that the direct, tangible importance of bees for all the food that we count on, it certainly makes that a possibility I wouldn't want to try out.
This is one of the possible extinctions that humanity is causing involuntarily, but this is with huge consequences. But this is by far not the first such case. So let's look at the catastrophe that no one talks about.
Long before the death of the last northern white rhino in the wild, there was the dodo, a large flightless bird that roamed the coastal woods of Mauritius, an island off the coast of Madagascar. The dodo thrived in its habitat, but in 1598, the dodo faced a world-ending threat: the arrival of white Europeans who were hungry for resources to fuel their emerging capitalist nations. With guns and axes, Dutch sailors carved up the dodo's habitat, leaving few safe havens for the bird. Out in the open with nowhere left to hide, those birds that didn't die from destruction of their habitat were killed by the barrel of Dutch guns and cooked in Dutch kettles. By 1662, the last dodo perished. The Dutch colonizers had driven the species into extinction, and the beastly bird of Mauritius soon faded into myth. Sadly, this is a common story, one that's been unfolding and accelerating over the last 4 centuries. Life on Earth as we know it is dying. A mass extinction event, the likes of which this planet has only experienced 5 other times, is now occurring. Today, we'll explore the underlying forces driving this catastrophic die-off. We'll journey from the fur trappers of North American colonies to the agro-industrial feedlots of Brazil, all the way to the machines of industry. This is the story of the 6th extinction. As plants and animals die, we must not blame human nature. That's both ahistorical and ignores the fact that there are countless ways to live with, instead of against, the natural world. So to reverse the 6th mass extinction, we must grapple with our mode of production. We must grapple with capitalism.
I'm going to interrupt here to recall and recap some major messages of this video about the changing roles of humans in this world. So when humans first developed, they were kind of like other animals, and they relied on their environment to support and sustain them. So that's when the environment was kind of provided the resources, or put differently, animals and humans pick from the environment the resources that they need to ensure their survival. But over time, that changed for humans, not for animals, and humans started to regard their environment as a means of extraction, as a resource to become rich, and to kind of sell and export, for example, a lumber from North America, and then ship that to Europe for use in Europe. And that's an entirely different perspective on the environment, right? So that's a change of perspective, not for sustenance anymore, but for gain, right? And that's what was called commodification in this presentation. Could also say call it exploitation, right? And what needs to happen next is realize that humanity has gained so much power and control over the environment that we don't need to exploit it anymore. Instead, we need to move on it and become kind of a fostering the environment, kind of like in a zoo, right? In the early ages, humans would kind of like hunt, let's say, elephants for sustenance. Then they would proceed to hunt elephants for their tusks in order to for extraction and for gain. And in a zoo, the perspective is that humans protect elephants and provide for them. So it's these three stages, and we need to kind of move on to the third stage, not just with elephants in the zoo, but globally. Realize the power that we have gained in order to change the perspective. It's maybe a little bit like workers in a company in the early capitalist ages. The goal of a company owner was to exploit the workers' labor for own gains, right? So that's the second phase. But nowadays, there's much more. There's human resource departments where the goal is shifting towards fostering the workers, maintaining their good health and good mood. So it's a change of a boss, the role of a boss from someone who is exploiting the workers to someone who is fostering and being kind of like a meta father or mother to the employees. And this change in philosophy is must also is overdue to happen also in the environment. Indeed, what humanity has done to the environment currently is kind of like a disease virus, right? So let me show you here a slide of right? No, a video actually, right? So here we have another video about humans being a disease. And you may know, remember this from the movie The Matrix, just the beginning.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague.
Do you remember the scene from The Matrix where Agent Smith describes people? While viruses have covered a large part of our lives with the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, the debates on whether the actual virus is humanity are also popular. Is that true? Are we really spreading in the same way as viruses, causing damage to everything we touch? Furthermore, the progress of humanity's journey to other planets for permanent settlement reveals how advanced these technologies are. This situation is likened to a virus trying to pass from one organism to another in order to survive. It's an accepted idea in many places that the human species could move away from being a virus if they manage to put aside conscious consumption of resources and greed.
Right. So the question whether humans are a disease to this planet or have grown into a disease, have spread to become a disease, and now should move on to become a cure for Earth. And this is also a perspective that has been promoted by environmentalist David Foreman. So David Foreman, here you see a picture, the late David Foreman. He said, "I believe that human overpopulation is the fundamental problem on Earth today, and we humans have become a disease, the human pox." And a similar vein, Sir David Attenborough also is convinced that humans have become a disease on Earth. So let me share you a note by Sir David Attenborough. We need to change perspective on the world. Indeed, we're used to look at the world as some, Mother Earth, it's called, as some cradle or the playground where we grew up in, and where we could experiment and try things and fail. But the new perspective is that that Earth is actually a very volatile and vulnerable system, and not to be tampered with carelessly. And this is what Nick Bostrom has been promoting from the perspective of a philosopher and physicist. So let me now show you about Nick Bostrom. So Nick Bostrom was born 50 years ago in Sweden. He got a MA in philosophy and physics from Göteborg University, then another master in physics, I think physics from King's College in London, and then a PhD from the London School of Economics. And in 2005, he founded the Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford. And his research works includes as aspects that vulnerable world hypothesis, existential risks, and superintelligence. So let's start talking a little bit about this vulnerable world hypothesis. And this is based on, here you see a picture depicting a vase, which is very delicate and can break easily, but we're not aware of that. So the paper that made this vulnerable world hypothesis famous by Nick Bostrom is, the abstract says, scientific and technological progress might change people's capabilities or incentives in ways that could destabilize civilization. Right, that's what we saw in many examples in the previous videos. For example, advances in do-it-yourself biohacking tools, right? So if everyday people became got the tools to edit genes in their backyard in a similar way that the homebrew computer system of Steve Jobs and enabled everybody to first build their own computer, and then later everybody was able to afford their own computer, the Apple IIe, and then everybody nowadays is able to use their own computer, right? We have smartphones. Similarly, imagine, and it is maybe pretty realistic, that soon every day we'll be able to do some genome editing with the plants or the pets at home. That will make it easy for anybody with basic training in biology to, in the end, kill millions if somebody creates a virus or some other dangerous life form that multiplies and spreads. Some have argued that COVID or AIDS was actually humanly created, but nevertheless, the danger is indeed imminent. Novel military technologies could trigger arms races in which whoever strikes first has a decisive advantage, or some economical advantage process may be invented that produces disastrous negative global externalities that are hard to regulate. So the message here, let me post that also in the chat. The message here is that humanity has become incredibly powerful, but are not equipped or practiced in maintaining their powers. It's let me repeat the saying. We have emotions from Paleolithic age, and we have institutions from the Dark Ages, and we have technology of God. And this is also what Nick Bostrom is warning against in our vulnerable world. Maybe the world is much more vulnerable than we think it is, or maybe we have become so powerful in relation to the world that now the world is at our own mercy, and thus we ourselves and the entire life. It does not appear that any human civilization has been destroyed as opposed to transformed by its own inventions yet. We do have examples of civilizations being destroyed by inventions made elsewhere. For example, the inventions that enabled, let me post that in the chat here. For example, the European inventions that enabled transoceanic travel and force projection could be regarded as black ball event for the indigenous populations of the America, Australia, Tasmania, and some other places. They got extinct. These were human populations that became extinct not by their own actions, but by our Western actions. The extinction of archaic hominid populations, such as the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, was probably facilitated by the technological superiority of Homo sapiens. But thus far, it seems, we have seen no sufficiently auto-destructive invention to count as a black ball for humanity. So black ball, this is also sometimes called a black swan event. This paper introduces the concept of a vulnerable world, roughly one in which there is some level of technological development at which civilization almost certainly gets devastated by a fault unless it has exited the semi-anarchic default condition that it means it has progressed and proceeded from early looking at the world as a host to looking at the world as a resource, and then looking at the world as something to be fostered and stewarded. Right. So that's Nick Bostrom on the vulnerable world hypothesis and how to adapt to that and how to maintain a world after it has been realized to be vulnerable. And this is something that actually also all astronauts uniformly point out after returning to Earth, after having looked at the Earth from outside. They have all come to realize how delicate a structure and unique a structure it is, right? So all other planets are basically barren. This is, for example, the Moon, but also the Mars, and only the Earth is such a complex and delicate system, and it lives. Everything happens on a very thin sphere on its surface, right? It's not even the entire Earth. It's a solid ball, but very, very thin surface where everything takes place. And realizing how delicate this is easily missed by us who are living on this and only look at things from inside, but stepping outside, this is where the realization hit every single astronaut, and this is what Nick Bostrom is also warning against and promoting. The next part of Nick Bostrom's work, maybe consequently, is about existential risks. And we've seen many examples of how life on Earth is always in danger of being eradicated. For example, the dinosaurs, maybe or maybe not, due to a huge meteorite impact. There have been, that's for sure, many meteorites impacting the Earth with the great disasters. For example, you know, the Great Bay between Mexico and Florida. This has been caused by a meteor. That's pretty sure nowadays. So that could happen all the time. But then there are diseases like the black pox, which eradicated a large part of human population in the Dark Ages and came out of nowhere. But now we're in the capability to create our own extinction events, existential risks. And Nick Bostrom has tried to classify such possible existential risks into global pandemics, severe long financial crisis, technological unemployment, cyber wars, military conflicts, nuclear wars, cosmic battle, severe drought and hunger, and immature superintelligence, something that he, one of the third thing that I'm mentioning among his research will be superintelligence. Let me show you another chart of classifying existential risks. As you can see here, and it's a two-dimensional chart. The y-axis is growing from personal via local, via global to transgenerational and to a cosmic scale, so growing scale. And the severity is growing from imperceptible via endurable, via terminal to hellish. And for example, loss of one beetle species, we talked about the loss of the bees, that is hard to perceive, imperceptible, but will have an impact that reaches beyond personal, local, and global to transgenerational, because once let's say the bees have died out, there's no way of recovering, and all future generations of humans will have to live without them. And existential risk, according to Bostrom, are the ones that are both transgenerational and terminal, but there are also other global catastrophic risks like the destruction of the ozone layer or drastic loss of biodiversity. Now, these are maybe unlikely to happen, but there are so many ways in which it can happen. So it's almost for sure that some existential risk will strike, maybe a different one, maybe one every 2 or 3 years, and maybe COVID was one of them that we just barely survived. And here's another chart depicting or classifying existential risks from theoretical to immediate extreme risks. And yeah, but I want to, since time is running out, let's move on to the third among Nick Bostrom's many research topic, namely talking a little bit about superintelligence. And let me try to show you another video by Nick Bostrom talking about the intelligence explosion. So here we go.
In this century, probably, we will be building this hugely consequential thing, which is the first general intelligence that will be smarter than humans. this involves an enormous responsibility. This is like maybe the most important thing that our species will ever have done on this planet, giving birth to this new level of intellect. I'm Nick Bostrom. I'm a professor at Oxford University, where I run the Future of Humanity Institute, with the unusual mandate of trying to think carefully about the really big picture questions for humanity and the future of Earth originating intelligent life.
Right. So also Nick Bostrom points out the importance of the transition from using and exploiting, in this case AI, to becoming a mentor and foster and taking care of AIs for kind of forming a symbiosis rather than a master-slave dominating and exploiting relationship with AI. That's what he said. But this is arguably also true for Earth itself. And next time we're going to discuss possible ways of how to make that transition, how to govern, and some person I'm going to refer to is Elinor Ostrom, another Nobel Prize winner for her work on governing the commons. But that's for next time. For today, time is up. Thank you very much for your attention. And remember to meet weekly. Have you all met weekly with your team members? And have you already started making predictions? Right? Have you? I hope you have. Right. Okay, so then let's wrap things up. And as usual, I'm going to stay online a few more minutes in case you have questions or comments.